4 years later, the trial is just beginning. At issue, who's responsible for 3 deaths on the Twilight Zone movie set? Lawyers for the film's director blame an explosives expert, but Sandy Kenyon reports prosecutors disagree.
The trial got underway with 2 different accounts of how the tragedy occurred. The defense claimed a bizarre accident led to 3 deaths. The prosecution laid the blame on the filmmakers, accusing them of staging a dangerous stunt.
You have to use your own common sense. You cannot mix explosions, a helicopter, and human beings, let alone children, and not realize that there's a potential for danger.
Director John Landis is accused of involuntary manslaughter along with 4 associates. His right-hand man, George Folsey, his production manager, Dan Allingham, the special effects coordinator, Paul Stewart, and Dorsey Wingo, the pilot of the helicopter which crashed. Landis's attorney, James Neal, insisted they were not responsible for what happened.
Not one of these gentlemen intended to hurt anyone. Not one of these gentlemen thought the scene, as planned and rehearsed, was dangerous. Not one of these gentlemen is guilty of criminal negligence.
There's plenty of attention surrounding these proceedings. John Landis is the first Hollywood director to face criminal charges in connection with the filming of a movie. The jury will have plenty of time to determine which side to believe. This trial is expected to last several months. Sandy Kenyon, CNN, Los Angeles.
Twilight Zone movie trial testified today after defense attorneys gave their opening arguments. The witness, a crew member on the film set, says director John Landis boasted of planning to blow the movie set apart with explosives. Landis and 4 associates are charged with involuntary manslaughter for a filming accident that killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 children. Defense attorneys say parents of the children will deny facts on the stand to support their lawsuits against the movie makers, but the prosecuting attorney called the statement an attack on her witnesses, saying they have no reason to lie. The mother of Samantha Smith, the young
face of the earth with explosives. Vic Morrow and 2 child actors were killed during the filming of the Twilight Zone, the movie, in 1982, when they were hit by a helicopter damaged by explosives used in the scene. Kelly?
Trial of director John Landis, charged in the deaths of 3 people killed when a helicopter crashed during the filming of the movie Twilight Zone. Defense attorney Harlan Brown delivered opening statements that did not sit well with the prosecution. Brown said he will show evidence that the parents of the 2 children killed in the crash knew of the dangers. And with Landis looking on, Brown went on to agree the parents will deny that knowledge because of litigation that could result in monetary gain.
They will deny that they knew that there were going to be a helicopter and special effects in a scene which they had seen a similar scene 5 hours before. We just cannot explain that because Mr. Folsey, in fact, told them all of that. There was an independent witness to that, and there's another family that was recruited whose children were standbys who were all told that.
That's simply an outrageous misstatement, and counsel knows it is. The parents are going to come in here and testify truthfully. They have absolutely no reason to lie.
It was during the filming of this scene that actor Vic Morrow, 6-year-old Renee Chen, and 7-year-old Micah Lee were killed. What caused the helicopter to crash and explode is still being debated. The trial, meantime, will continue on Monday.
Voluntary man each other. Today, Production Secretary Donna Schumann was again on the stand. She says that director John Landis told her 4 years ago he thought he would go to jail for using 2 children when they had explosives on the set when making the Twilight Zone movie. The 2 children and actor Vic Morrow died in the accident on that set. Landis and the 4 others who were involved here are now accused of involuntary manslaughter. Yesterday, former prosecutor Gary Kesselman said he couldn't recall Schumann telling him about Landis's alleged remarks. That brought an angry attack today in the hallway outside the courtroom, an attack on the prosecutor from the defense.
She's accusing her own deputy of lying just because she can't conceive of the fact that one of her witnesses could be lying, and that's the first time I bet that's ever happened in trials in this state.
I have no comment on Mr. Kesselman. Why? It is not my place to say what is or is not on Mr. Kesselman's mind, or what Mr. Kesselman does or does not recall.
Today, the defense again asked for a mistrial, and that request was again denied.
more turmoil.
Stuck to her story that Landis had joked about going to jail for using child actors in dangerous situations, and that outside, as Channel 11's Mike Batula reports, attorneys from both sides got into a verbal skirmish during a hallway news conference.
Donna Schumann stood by her testimony that both John Landis and George Folsey remarked that they could go to jail for putting child actors so close to explosives. And she remained firm in her statement that former prosecutor Gary Kesselman told her not to say that to the grand jury or the preliminary hearing because he wanted to save that testimony for the main event.
Did he explain to you that not giving defendant statements to the defense would be a violation of law?
No, he said it's okay to do that. Everybody understands that, as long as you folks get it within a certain time frame, which would be the trial.
The differences over Schumann's testimony spilled out into the hallway during the noon recess with sharp remarks by both the prosecutor and several of the defense attorneys.
She's so desperate to win this case, she's willing to sacrifice a good, honest district attorney like Gary Kesselman for this case.
That's what she's doing. She's laughing, but that's what she's doing.
That's right.
She's accusing her own deputy of lying just because she can't conceive of the fact that one of her witnesses could be lying.
I find it very amusing and somewhat fascinating that Gary Kesselman, whom the defense attorneys have tried to malign for 4 years, is now being made out to be a hero by them. And I will go on record again as indicating I think Gary Kesselman did an absolutely outstanding job on this particular case.
The defense also tried but did not succeed in getting Judge Roger Boren to declare a mistrial. Mike Botula, Channel 11 News.
Coming up right here as our 8 o'clock news broadcast continues, another
In a highly unusual turn on the witness stand, D'Agostino told the court that she thinks she's the victim of a plot. The plot, she says, is to have her lose the case against director John Landis and his associates. She contends that vital information about the case was withheld from her. D'Agostino also claims that there were allegations of drug and alcohol use on the Twilight Zone set, but says that those charges were not properly investigated at the time. The DA's office plans to look into D'Agostino's allegations, and the Twilight Zone defendants say that they are amazed by it all.
Other news tonight, it was certainly
20 years ago today, the Monkees debuted on NBC.
The Twilight Zone trial of director John Landis and 4 others on charges of involuntary manslaughter has concluded its second week. Eric Burns has the story.
Production Secretary Donna Schumann testified that the defendants knew what they were doing. Shooting at night with explosives and children was dangerous and illegal. She said she heard associate producer George Folsey consider the possible penalties.
He said, a slap on the wrist and a little fine, unless they find out about explosives, and then they'll put my butt in jail.
Schumann said she told this to the former Twilight Zone prosecutor, but he took the stand and denied it. This led to an almost unheard of thing. The current prosecutor took the stand and supported Schumann.
I don't think we ever anticipated that with the first witness we would get into a situation where we would end up with 2 prosecutors taking the stand under oath and accusing each other of lying. So far, the evidence tells us that either a witness who was set forth in the opening statement as a star witness or an important witness, either that witness is not telling the truth, or the prosecuting attorney that handled this case through its early stages and took it through the preliminary hearing is not telling the truth.
The Twilight Zone trial is now in recess for a week. Eric Burns, Entertainment Tonight.
When one of America's director John Landis was, quote, on cocaine the night of the accident. The former prosecutor, Gary Kesselman, admitted that he didn't pursue the claims because numerous witnesses said it wasn't true. But D'Agostino suggested Kesselman didn't pursue the matter on the word of one witness alone, former production secretary Donna Schumann. Yesterday, witnesses testified about Landis' conduct before the 1982 accident that killed Vic Morrow and 2 children.
The secretary who worked for John Landis testified that final drafts of the Twilight Zone script calling for 2 children to work around explosives late at night were kept under lock and key.
Did he tell you anything about distribution of those scripts?
Not to give it out to anybody.
And a casting director testified that when her office told Landis the children's work in his movie sounded dangerous and was illegal at night, he reacted angrily.
He was a little gruff, I believe, because we wouldn't be involved in this, and said, the hell with you guys, we don't need you, we'll get them off the streets ourselves.
Defense attorneys maintained the accident which killed Vic Morrow and 2 children was unforeseeable.
When we return, more from the...
4 others are charged with involuntary manslaughter is shaping up as a battle of conflicting styles as well as defense versus prosecution.
Yesterday, in her opening remarks, the prosecutor quoted from the Twilight Zone script to demonstrate to jurors what she saw as very evident dangers.
One after another, the buildings blow up in flames as the helicopter systematically destroys the village in its search for Bill. This was a scene, ladies and gentlemen, to which Landis, who wrote it, fully intended to place not only Vic Morrow, but 2 tiny children. These were not deaths from which someone could get up and wipe the bloody-looking ketchup off their face and say, I'm alive. They were very, very real deaths. They were not an illusion, ladies and gentlemen.
In his opening remarks, Landis' attorney used a drawing of the Twilight Zone location to show jurors the careful planning and attention to safety before what he called the unforeseeable accident.
The prosecutor says there was no rehearsal or inadequate rehearsal. The proof will show this is wrong. The prosecutor says we knew of danger to the children and disregarded it. The proof will show this is wrong. The prosecutor says we didn't explain the scene to the parents. The proof will show this is wrong. The prosecutor says John Landis wanted realism at any cost. The proof will show this is wrong. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, when the prosecutor says these defendants are guilty of criminal negligence, the proof will show this is wrong.
7 women, present and former...
Were people frightened?
Some people were frightened, yes.
Was Vic Morrow frightened?
Vic Morrow was frightened.
Chavez, a 15-year film veteran, says the director, John Landis, took unusual risks, forcing everyone to work long hours, ignoring the chance to replace Morrow with a stuntman.
Not to say that a stuntman's life is less valuable than an actor's, but when you have a project like that, you try to use all the departments that are available to make a gag like that go down.
Who have expertise?
Yeah.
Defense attorneys in the trial have argued the events were unforeseeable, that none of the 5 defendants, including Landis, are guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
To some degree, Chavez's information puts that argument into question. But it is a decision for the jury, one that will be made when the trial is over, 3 or 4 months from now. Elizabeth Anderson, Channel 4 News, Burbank.
A grand jury in San Diego looking into the death of American DEA agent Enrique Camarena will hear from a...
in the Twilight Zone manslaughter trial, but in the end, the defense failed in its bold move to have the whole case thrown out, and the trial continued with more dramatic testimony about the accident that killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors. Channel 2's Patty Ecker was in the courtroom.
The judge in the Twilight Zone case ruled today that the trial of movie director John Landis and 4 others would not be thrown out of court. For the past 10 days, the defense attorneys have accused the prosecutor, Leah DiAgostino, and her key witness, Donna Schumann, of lying. Schumann testified that Landis and associate producer George Folsey talked about going to jail for using children on a movie set with explosives. Defense lawyers charged that was perjury and that the prosecutor lied to back up her witness.
We believe she's committed perjury. We believe that she wants to convict these people so much because this is a publicity case that she's crossed over the ethical line.
Judge Boren told lawyers to stop the debate about prosecution conduct and let the jury decide who is telling the truth. Donna Schumann was not on the stand today, but her testimony was. Both witnesses called this afternoon backed up Schumann's testimony that movie director John Landis and associate producer George Folsey made references to going to jail before the helicopter accident.
Donna Jean said that Mr. Folsey had said that if they found out about the explosives, that his ass would land in jail.
Gail Wellens, a friend of Donna Schumann, testified that Schumann quoted those words to her the day after the Twilight Zone tragedy. Then Donna Schumann's husband took the stand and also confirmed his wife's remarks.
What do you call your wife telling Mr. Kesselman in that regard?
John Landis, on one occasion, he ran through the halls and yelling, "We're all going to jail, we're all going to jail."
Dr. Schumann said she made those remarks in May of '83. Patty Ecker, Channel 2 News.
There won't be any
performers.
I think it's the first time.
Yeah.
That a director is this, especially.
of the two children who died are taking the stand. A mother, on the verge of tears, said she never knew her son would be in danger. Channel 2's Patty Ecker has a story.
7-year-old Mika Lee was not an actor. Through a friend of their father's, he and Renee Chen got a chance to do a bit part in Twilight Zone, the movie. Today, his mother testified that she was told her son and a little girl would be used in a scene in which actor Vic Morrow would carry the children across a river. Pictures would be taken, said Mrs. Lee. But that's all she was told.
Did he tell you that your son Mika was going to be filmed with explosions going on around him?
No.
Did he tell you that your son Mika was going to be filmed with a helicopter about 20 feet over him?
No.
The filming with the children took 2 nights. Mrs. Lee accompanied Mika to the location the first night and stayed there until 4 a.m. There was some filming and a lot of waiting, she said. So when she was asked to return the next night, she said she couldn't, that her husband would go with Mika.
My husband, he took off the 1-week vacation to be with Mika, so he went with Mika.
And did you ever see Mika again?
No.
Mrs. Lee is a social worker who deals with abused children. She said she didn't know that children needed permits to work in movies. Mika had none. She was told he would be paid $500 a day for filming. And after that first night, he was paid.
And did he tell you how much Mika would be paid, or you would be paid for Mika for the next night?
$500, same thing.
And he told you it would only take about a half hour, right?
Right. He said he promised to finish as soon as we got there.
By the way, Mrs. Lee, did you ever get that other $500?
No.
Then defense attorney Harlan Braun asked Mrs. Lee about answers she gave to questions from the National Transportation Safety Board a month after the accident. That NTSB report indicated that Mrs. Lee had said she did know about the explosives, that she did know about the helicopter. But today she testified that she never said that she never knew the nature of the scene. Patty Ecker, Channel 2 News.
A 6-year-old girl who was accidentally killed during filming of the 1982 movie Twilight Zone took the witness stand today. This in the manslaughter trial against director John Landis and 4 others. Elizabeth Anderson was in court as Mark Chin delivered his tear-filled testimony. We're going to switch to her now for a live report on what happened. Elizabeth.
Well, as you say, John, it was really an emotional day at the Twilight Zone trial. Mark Chen, the father of victim Renee Chen, took the stand, and he basically backed up the testimony from last week from a Mrs. Kim Lee, who lost her son in that filming, Mika Lee. They both said they never realized how dangerous the filming of the Twilight Zone would ever be. At one point, he broke down, overcome by emotion as he recalled the last night he ever saw his daughter Renee alive. It was during the filming of that scene in which the helicopter crashed that 6-year-old Renee Chen died.
Did Mr. Folsey, or Mr. Landis, or anyone else on that motion picture tell you that your daughter Renee is going to be filmed with explosives in close proximity to her?
No.
Did either Mr. Landis or Mr. Folsey or anyone else on that set, Mr. Chen, tell you that your daughter Renee is going to be filmed with a helicopter approximately 24 feet over her head?
No.
That helicopter was brought down by powerful special effects explosions, and in interviews conducted exclusively by Channel 4 and also in testimony in court, it has been indicated that it was the director I should say, John Landis, who asked that helicopter to fly lower and the explosions to be larger. Today's testimony from Mr. Chin, as far as the prosecution feels, only fuels his charge of reckless conduct and involuntary manslaughter against Landis and the 4 other defendants. The defense says it will have its chance to tell its side of the story as the trial progresses. But for tomorrow anyway, the jury will leave the criminal courts room. It will go to the Academy Awards Theater, and that is when it will see some of that film, at least that one scene for itself. 6 cameras were rolling as it captured that tragic crash. Live from the criminal courts building, Elizabeth Anderson, Channel 4 News.
Okay, Elizabeth, thank you very much. We're going to take a break here. Coming up next, Fritz says summer is beating a quick retreat, but it won't be all that bad.
And the Twilight Zone case. More testimony there today. And Glendale Police...
The Twilight Zone involuntary manslaughter trial continued today. Our Paul Dandridge tells us that it centered on the testimony of the father of one of the victims.
Mark Chen, the father of 6-year-old Renee, took the stand. He is the second parent to testify so far in the trial. He was with his daughter, shown here on the left, with Micah Lee the first night the children were taken to the Twilight Zone set near Saugus. Mr. Chen's testimony covers charges against director John Landis, associate producer George Folsey, and production manager Dan Allingham. 4 years after the accident, Mr. Chen remains grief-stricken. While describing events on the morning of July 21st, 1982, he broke down.
What did you do in the trailer, sir?
We're resting.
Then what happened?
Then someone came and woke up us.
Do you remember who it was that woke you up?
I don't remember.
Then where did you go?
They took the child for makeup.
Would you like some water, Mr. Chen?
The defense contends that the tragedy was unforeseeable, unavoidable, and that the parents did know the children were working illegally and with explosives.
I guess I'm saying, in a sense, that what this case is about is not warning or versus warning, no warning versus warning, but whether we're guilty of reckless moral conduct.
The prosecution has held that the defendants knew of the danger, and that certainly if the parents knew, they would not have allowed their children to be there.
Clearly, neither the children nor the families assumed any risk of their people, of the children dying. The fact is that neither Landis nor Folsey told the parents about the explosives or the helicopter.
Later this week on Thursday, the 2 other parents who were with their children the night that they died will testify. And tomorrow the jury and the court will go to the movies to see the film of the accident, that very important film that one of the investigators for the prosecution said is the case. Reporting from the Twilight Zone trial, Paul Dandridge, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Got an update now on the condition of Heather Thomas.
Gave some of his players elementary and junior high school youngsters.
Your name is? Kathy. Elaine. They have been friends for 50 years.
First today, get their first look at outtakes of the fatal Twilight Zone accident. We'll have a live report. And should our favorite movie classics be colorized? Some Hollywood heavyweights say no. This and more next on the Channel 4 News.
4 News at 4 is coming up next. Our top stories today: attempted murder and forgery charges filed against a male nurse accused of posing as a doctor in a telephone murder attempt.
Carol Hutchison reports on alarming new evidence of the harm breathing smoggy air is doing to children.
Jurors in the Twilight Zone trial go to the theater today to see the outtakes of that tragic accident that killed 3.
A warning from the government today about the...
At 4, the prosecution in the Twilight Zone manslaughter trial today introduced a crucial piece of evidence. It's the actual film clip in which Vic Morrow and 2 child actors were killed in a helicopter accident during the filming of a Vietnam War scene. The footage included camera angles of the accident that even the news media had not seen before. The screening took place at the Motion Picture Academy Theater in Beverly Hills, and that's where Channel 7's Paul Dandridge is right now, standing by with a live report. Pretty vivid material there, and I'm wondering what the reaction of the jurors were to this.
Well, the jurors didn't react as much, it seemed to me, by watching their faces, Jerry, as it seemed everybody else in the room did, including the judge, whose eyes seemed to well up quite a bit. The reporters were affected. It was a terribly brutal final scene, I must tell you. I also want to tell you that we're not going to show you all of that final scene. The evidence included today 28 minutes of scenes, including that final one, as well as scenes that led up to that shooting that was done at 2:20 in the morning on July 23rd, 1982. Let's roll the tape and take a look at some of that. This is a scene that was done at about 9:30 the night before, that Thursday night on July 22nd. And at this point, Vic Morrow was going over to pick up the children, Micah Lee and Renee Chen. And behind them, you see the hut explode. An indication by the prosecution that there was a dangerous situation there, that they knew about that early on. Now, this is a helicopter shot, and some more of the explosions in a later scene that we're going to see more of on the ground. But again, the position of the prosecution is that this was much too dangerous. Now, this scene in particular here is done at about 11:30 that particular night, and the main character, Vic Morrow, is yelling at a helicopter above, and you can see the explosions behind him. The parents did not see this scene. The parents and the children were about a quarter of a mile away, and it is the position of the prosecution that if the parents did see this, that they would have not allowed their children to take part in it. This is the final scene. A terrible explosion. You see it there. That affected the helicopter. It starts to slowly turn and slowly lose control. And the scene now, what happens next, I think we should... Yes, we cut out of it. The blade comes down, and in an instant, the three people in the water are gone. The people who watched it were gripped. There's John Landis and his wife, Mrs. Folsey, was in tears. Very gripping to watch this. Outside, the defense attorney, Jim Neal, reacted. Should the children, should Mr. Morrow have been put into a very explosive, literally, situation, a very dangerous situation?
I think when you hear the proof, you'll find out that it was not a very dangerous situation. Had the scene was planned to not to be dangerous.
What went wrong? Mr. Landis's quest for realism exceeded all bounds of safety. It was never safety first. It was realism first, and forget about safety, because he wanted to create a particular scene, and he got his effect. But at what cost?
The movie was gripping to watch the first time, and then, of course, the jury and the people here watched it a second time, and I must tell you that was worse because you knew more precisely when something was going to happen, and there was no way to prevent it. You couldn't keep your eyes off the screen, and yet you wanted to turn away. As bad as it was, we're going to hear more testimony tomorrow from two people who were there with their children. Two of the parents will testify tomorrow in this trial, back in the courtroom in downtown Los Angeles. Reporting live from Beverly Hills, Paul Dandridge. Back to you, Jerry.
Paul, thank you so much for that, and also thank you for using the good taste, if we can use those words, that you used in reporting the story for us today.
To a much lesser degree today in the manslaughter trial of Twilight Zone director John Landis and 4 others. Elizabeth Anderson was there as that powerful piece of evidence was shown during a special screening at a Beverly Hills theater. Let's go to her now at the criminal courthouse downtown for a live report on the reaction to that film. Elizabeth?
Well, Kirsty, actually, I left the courtroom for the theater today, and we are in front of the Academy Awards Theater, where the jury saw perhaps the most important, as you say, very dramatic piece of evidence so far in the trial. They saw the scene in which the helicopter crashed during the filming of the Twilight Zone movie, killing actor Vic Morrow and 2 small children. Here is that scene now. It was filmed at 2:30 4 years ago. At the time, the helicopter was 24 feet above the heads of the 3 actors. It crashed suddenly. And you saw that scene just as the jury did just a little while ago. Could this tragedy have been avoided, or were the events unforeseeable? That is what the Twilight Zone trial will decide. According to the prosecution today, Director John Landis ignored warnings earlier that night that the helicopter was too close to the explosives that eventually brought that helicopter down.
Well, that's just not true at all. The scene was changed. The helicopter was put where the helicopter pilot wanted it to be put, and that had nothing to do whatsoever with this accident, as the proof will show as we go through it.
What went wrong? Mr. Landis's quest for realism exceeded all bounds of safety. It was never safety first. It was realism first, and forget about safety, because he wanted to create a particular scene, and he got his effect. But at what cost?
Tomorrow and during the trial, as it goes back into the courtroom, the parents of the children that were killed, who were the parents that were actually on the set, will testify. Yesterday, one parent, Mark Chen, said that he was never warned about explosives or a helicopter, that he never knew the scene would be so dangerous. Live from the Academy Awards Theater, Elizabeth Anderson, Channel 4 News.
All right, Elizabeth, thank you. Children in Los Angeles have...
File watched the horrible scenes that led to the death of 3 people, and we will have the complete story. We will also has become evidence in a criminal court case. And in this case, it is the involuntary manslaughter trial of director John Landis and 4 of his associates in the film The Twilight Zone. And as Channel 11's Chris Harris tells us, the jury saw 28 minutes of that film today.
The Twilight Zone jury journeyed to the Motion Picture Academy building in Beverly Hills to view the final 3 scenes of the movie, scenes shot the night of July 22nd, 1982. The scenes, which take place in a Vietnamese village that was built at a site near Saugus, end with actor Vic Morrow trying to escape from the village, carrying child actors Renee Chen and Mika Din Lee across a creek. However, a camera-carrying helicopter that was also part of the scene was hit by debris from a special effects explosion in the village and crashed into the creek, killing Morrow and the youngsters instantly. The prosecution argues the accident was preventable. The defense disagrees.
It was never safety first. It was realism first, and forget about safety, because he wanted to create a particular scene, and he got his effect. But at what cost?
It was not a very dangerous situation. The scene was planned to not to be dangerous.
This earlier scene was shot at 11:30 that night, and the prosecution says it's a key to the charges against Landis and the others because it allegedly shows the helicopter was in trouble with special effects 3 hours before the fatal crash. Seconds after the crash, John Landis is seen running into the water. Other crew members rush into the creek as well to get the chopper crew out. There is no sign of Vic Morrow or the kids. After viewing the film twice, the jury silently filed out of the theater and back onto the bus for the trip back to the criminal courts building downtown. After the jury was shown this film clip, court was adjourned for the day. It now goes back to the criminal courts building. Next on the stand, 2 people who were present the night of the tragedy, Mika Lee's father and Renee Chen's mother. In Beverly Hills, Chris Harris, Channel 11 News.
Male nurse Hal Rockman is being held tonight.
It would be a relief for jurors who watched a big screen showing of death.
It was a glamorous setting for a grim task. The jurors in the Twilight Zone case came to the Motion Picture Academy to view death on the big screen, in color, from several different angles. Veteran actor Vic Morrow and 2 children were killed when a stunt went awry. Now the man in charge, director John Landis, is on trial for involuntary manslaughter, along with 4 associates. Rarely is an alleged crime documented so completely, and showing it to the jury is important to the prosecution.
Pictures say a lot more than words ever can.
And even the defense admits...
I don't see how you could see this without being deeply sorry that this happened.
Seeing what happened on the big screen is clearly more dramatic than watching it on a TV set. But the defense insisted jurors were not swayed by the surroundings. Next, the jurors will return to the more familiar surroundings of a downtown courtroom. They'll hear from 2 witnesses present when the tragedy occurred. The father who lost his son and the mother who lost her daughter. Sandy Kenyon, CNN, Beverly Hills.
More news after this.
Manslaughter trial in Los Angeles Superior Court. Among the witnesses was the mother of the 6-year-old girl who lost her life on the movie set that fateful night 4 years ago. Little Renee Chin was killed along with another child and actor Vic Morrow when a helicopter fell on them during the filming of a Vietnam War scene. Today, Shai Yahweh Chen broke into tears as she described the crash that claimed her daughter's life.
Then I saw the helicopter fall on top of the 3 people. At that moment, I was so scared. I thought something happened to my daughter.
Film director John Landis and 4 associates are charged with involuntary manslaughter in this case. Jerry.
And another case here, actor Glenn Ford is being taken to court. He's being sued by a woman who claims...
Also, a decision in Washington today may breathe new life into a local factional testimony in the Twilight Zone trial today, this time from the mother of one of the children killed during the filming of that movie. Liz Anderson has been in court all day. She's standing by with a live report. Elizabeth?
Bill and Kirsty, a shy and a very tearful Mrs. Chen took the stand today. She rarely looked up, and she could only whisper her answers, through her Chinese interpreter, since Mrs. Chen speaks very little English. But there was no mistaking what she said. Mrs. Xian Chen recalled a night in July of 1982. Mrs. Chen's only daughter, 6-year-old Renee, was one of 2 children killed by a crashing helicopter during the filming of the Twilight Zone movie. Mrs. Chen was actually on the set that fatal night and said she could only watch in horror as it happened. Only moments before that tragedy, the helicopter had hovered 24 feet above the 3 actors' heads. The prosecution insists the federal limit is 500 feet. Mrs. Chen, who also testified that she was never warned about explosions or a helicopter, remembered that the director, John Landis, kept yelling for that helicopter to fly even lower. When she asked about it, she testified that the associate producer, George Folsey, patted her on the shoulder, assuring her it was not dangerous. But then suddenly, at 2:30 in the morning, exploding special effects brought that helicopter down, killing Renee and the 2 other actors. An interpreter translates for Mrs. Chen.
At that moment, I was so scared. I thought something happened to my daughter. They were running. They also yelling, asked me to run. I was yelling for my daughter.
I'm sorry. I think it's inappropriate for me at this time to say anything.
If they really want the truth to come out, why are they trying so desperately to keep it away from the jury?
It has already come out in court that the children were hired illegally without permits, and that Landis and some of the others, including Folsey, tried to conceal that fact. The prosecution feels that the testimony today, the emotional testimony from Mrs. Chen, will fuel its charge of reckless conduct, of involuntary manslaughter. That Landis ignored repeated warnings, even from his own pilot, that that scene would be risky and dangerous. Live from the Criminal Courts Building, Elizabeth Anderson, Channel 4 News.
Thank you, Elizabeth. New demands from Sun Valley today to close an elementary school there until some nearby hazardous material.
Plans for you.
Stand at the Twilight Zone trial today. Parents of the 2 youngsters killed during the filming relived that horrible accident. Channel 2's Patty Ecker was there.
It was the most emotional day of the month-long Twilight Zone trial as the court heard testimony from the parents of the children killed during the filming. Xian Chen, mother of 6-year-old Renee, and Dr. Daniel Lee, father of 7-year-old Mika. Both parents were on the film set when the helicopter crashed. Mrs. Chen spoke softly and tearfully through an interpreter who translated her Mandarin Chinese into English. She described what she saw in the last minutes of Renee's life.
Then I saw the helicopter fall on top of the 3 people.
那时候心里好害怕。
At that moment, I was so scared.
我在想，我看到我女儿，我心里在想，她干嘛有事情？
I thought something happened to my daughter.
Following Mrs. Chen was Dr. Daniel Lee, the father of 7-year-old Mika. As did Mrs. Chen, he said he never knew his child was working illegally, never knew that explosives or a helicopter were to be used in that final scene. He said as filming began and actor Vic Morrow and the children entered the water, he heard someone giving directions to the helicopter.
I heard the voice saying, lower, lower.
Dr. Lee was born and raised in Vietnam. He said he experienced explosions from real bombs from the time he was 10 years old. He had an instant reaction, he said, to the explosion that went off at Indian Dunes just before his son was killed.
I fell on the ground.
Why did you fall down to the ground?
Because I was so horrified. The next thing I saw, chaos, people running, shoving, running out for their life, and then finally I saw the body of my son.
Dr. Lee will be cross-examined by defense lawyers on Monday. Patty Ecker, Channel 2 News.
A late-night fire claimed the life of a mother and son in Norwalk. The blaze broke out just before
Today, 7-year-old Micah Dean Lee was killed with another child and actor Vic Morrow when a helicopter fell on them during the filming of a Vietnam War scene. The boy's father, Dr. Daniel Lee, told the jury what he saw at the scene of the accident that fateful night.
You saw your son's body, did you not?
Objection. Yes, I saw my son's body without a head. Just a second.
The heated session ended with Dr. Lee testifying over the objections of defense attorneys. This apparently was the first time jurors were told that one of the two children killed was decapitated. Cherry.
The arraignment was postponed today for an RTD.
Los Angeles homicide detective Twilight Zone trial. A Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy today showed off a scale model of the film location where 3 actors died in a helicopter accident back in 1982. Deputy John Shannon says he constructed the model from sketches he made about 6 hours after the accident occurred. Defense attorneys pointed out that the model does not represent the way the scene looked at the exact time of the crash, which killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors. Director John Landis and 4 other men are charged with manslaughter in the case. And a nurse charged...
On the set of the Twilight Zone movie. And today, 5 people blamed for that accident go on trial. Sandy Kenyon reports.
The accident which...
Another case we're watching closely here, a Los Angeles County fire inspector who was the safety officer on the Twilight Zone film testified that he never was told that the helicopter which crashed, killing actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors, was going to hover over the set. And Director John Landis and 4 others are on trial for involuntary manslaughter because of the fatal accident. Inspector DeWitt Morgan says he expected the helicopter to keep moving.
If that helicopter is going to come in and hover, it would definitely affect what we would have allowed.
Why?
because for a helicopter or any other ship to hover over an explosive area is going to be dangerous.
Defense attorneys made the point that it was not necessarily dangerous.
As far as your duties are concerned, it would make no difference if the helicopter, where the helicopter hovered, as long as it was a safe distance away before the detonations went off. Isn't that true?
As long as the helicopter is well clear, yes.
The accident occurred in 1982 during the filming of that movie. A new state report identifies 6 areas in Southern California that could have potentially dangerous concentrations.
Testimony today in the Twilight Zone trial of director John Landis, one man claiming that he warned of a possible helicopter crash but was ignored. You'll remember that actor Vic Morrow and 2 children were killed on that set when a chopper crashed to the ground during some special effects explosions. A retired fireman who was atop a cliff above the set says that he saw it all, and in court today he said that he warned that it could happen.
I felt certain that the explosion to come would put the helicopter on the ground.
The fireman says that he was assured by his bosses that the chopper scenes would be safe. Prosecutors are trying to prove that director Landis and others are guilty of involuntary manslaughter in connection with those deaths.
In another controversial case, a California
out the fact that an effort was made during the filming of the fatal crash scene to downplay the fact that children were being used in a scene where explosions would take place. The witness was Hillary Leach. She was on the set as part of a training program for future directors. One of her assignments was to escort the 2 Vietnamese children who later died in the helicopter crash. She testified she was told she must change the way she referred to the youngsters.
Were you told anything about not referring to them as children?
Yes.
What were you told in that regard?
I was told not to refer to them as children.
Was that also by Mr. Howes?
Yes.
Earlier, the defense recalled one of the fire safety officers on the movie, the only officer who had claimed that he warned about the dangers of the helicopter scene. Defense attorneys brought out the fact that this officer did not include in his report of the accident certain details of his conversation with his boss. Defense attorneys pointed out that the officer, Richard Ebenthuer, was invited to take his concerns to movie officials, but did not do so. That trial continues tomorrow. Paul.
And as you know, it's getting down to the 11th hour here for Campaign 86. When we continue...
Crazy. Are you related, the 2 of you?
That's my mom.
That's your mother? Come here, Mom. You sit here. No, calm down.
Way up on the top of the cliff, and I would say, well, maybe 50 feet higher than the other explosions, or more, maybe.
Had he known, and I think all the firemen indicated that, had they known that there was a bomb under a hutch and a helicopter was going to come in at that altitude, clearly something would have been done.
The fire safety officers who testified saying they thought the set was safe, and it's their job to make that decision.
Second Assistant Director Anderson House recalled comments during a scene involving smaller explosives prior to the fatal scene.
After the scene, I heard John Landis say, if you think that was big, wait till you see the next one.
House said he was worried about the dangerous combination of explosives and a helicopter around actors on the set. But House's superior was First Assistant Director Ellie Cohen.
At any time, did Mr. Anderson House ever come to you and express that he thought this scene was dangerous?
No.
Cohen recalled instructions he was ordered to give the helicopter immediately prior to the crash.
I'm 95% sure that I communicated to the helicopter pilot, lower.
You say you communicated, you're 95% sure you communicated to the helicopter pilot, lower, lower. Was that on your own authority, or did someone tell you to do that?
It was not on my own authority.
Who would have told you to do that?
The director.
And this week, Judge Roger Boren ruled the prosecution may ask witnesses if they feared reprisals for testifying in the Twilight Zone trial. Deputy District Attorney Leah DiAgostino has contended some witnesses feared they would be blackballed by the motion picture industry if they told the truth. John?
Thank you, Scott. Indiana Jones, a big...
And I felt like I had to come to the mall tonight.
Ever seen...
rehearsed, even though it ended in tragedy. Cohn also said that to the best of his knowledge, director John Landis had never insisted on anything being done if it was considered dangerous. Defense attorneys say Cohn's testimony showed Landis did not endanger his crew by asking for unsafe special effects.
You have no independent record.
Actress Gilda Radner tonight is recovering after having a malignant cyst removed from an ovary.
Continued in the Twilight Zone manslaughter trial. Scott Osborne has an update in our news studio. Scott?
Thanks, Mary. The fire safety officer in charge of the Twilight Zone set said he'd never seen special effects explosions as large as the blasts that downed a helicopter that killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 children. But George Hall also acknowledged that he disregarded another fire safety officer's prediction of disaster before the fatal scene. Hull testified he hadn't known that actors were to be in the scene, nor that the helicopter would be hovering 24 feet above the set, nor that a bomb had been placed in a structure.
The whole area was ignited and illuminated at that point.
What did you see?
Tremendous firestorm, fireball with large volumes of fire and smoke, very heavy with smoke.
But Hull, who stood on a cliff overlooking the scene, had been warned that the helicopter's flight path would take it into the special effects explosions. The warning came from Fire Safety Officer Richard Abentoyer. But Hull, describing Abentoyer as always a problem, ignored the warning.
Did you consider that a complaint by Mr. Abentoyer? A safety complaint?
No.
What did you consider that?
I considered it one of Abentoyer's typical snivels.
We devastated the prosecution's case, and I can't believe that this crazy woman is still hanging in there.
By crazy woman, you mean the Deputy District Attorney Leah DiAgostino?
Yeah, it's the crazy. That's what we call her, among other things.
What else do you call her?
Well, we just basically think that she's somewhat deranged and a sick woman.
I must be doing something right to elicit all this incredible hostility on his part. I think it's wonderful. I hope he continues to do so. It'll show I'm doing my job.
And the defense again asked that Prosecutor DiAgostino be held in contempt. A defense attorney had asked witness Hall about the cause of the helicopter crash, and Hall referred to a federal investigation. But the results of that probe have been excluded from the trial. When Mrs. DiAgostino discussed the testimony with reporters, the defense claims she violated a gag order on material not in evidence. John?
Thank you, Scott. A few moments ago, we showed you the Harvard men...
On the identity crisis, how car hops on roller skates suddenly popped up again.
The Twilight Zone trial continued today with some dramatic testimony coming from a stuntman on the scene the night Vic Morrow and 2 child actors died. Paul Dandridge has details.
Vic Morrow's stunt double, Gary McClarty, testified that Morrow told him he wanted to do all his own stunts, and that included the fatal 220 scene. McClarty was in the helicopter at 220 when it crashed, and during the 11:30 shot, he testified he had to jump back, the heat from the explosions so intense at 11:30. The pilot, Dorsey Wingo, screamed out in pain as the heat burned his neck. McClarty says he told director John Landis if the explosions got bigger in the next scene, we'd have a lot of trouble, and Landis agreed to tone down that fatal scene. McClarty compared the 2 scenes, saying at 220 the chopper was further away from the hillside.
Yes, I could, because I didn't have to look to the right. I could look directly below the way I was hanging out of the chopper.
And see what?
Yes.
Now, how many feet of water could you see at the 220 shot that you could not see any water at 11:30?
Probably 10 or 15 feet.
The prosecution contends the defendants knew that final scene was dangerous. Defense attorney Jim Neal says Landis did change the scene to make it safe.
Because there was a change made. And had there been no change made, then that'd been something else. But when somebody says, hey, we got too hot, go to the director does something about it, then that's, I think that's important.
McClarty also testified that if he thought any scene was unsafe for Vic Morrow, he, as his stunt double, would have told the director.
Did you speak up and say at the 220 scene, Mr. Morrow shouldn't do that scene?
No, I didn't.
And is that because you didn't think it was dangerous for Mr. Morrow to do that scene?
I didn't think it was a bit dangerous.
Toward the end of his testimony, the prosecution tried to impeach the witness. McClarty tried to show the jury that perhaps he wasn't being as candid as he might be, an indication perhaps that McClarty was more of a help for the defense than the prosecution. At the Twilight Zone trial, Paul Dandridge, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Several stories about our school.
Marcus Allen is still having problems with that ankle, Charlie.
And now we'd like to welcome those of you who have been watching the Cincinnati-Detroit game, with Cincinnati winning that.
Morrow and the two children.
What were you told Vic Morrow was going to be doing?
That he would be to the right of the helicopter, and at a cue that they had worked out, apparently that he was going to make a cross after we made the 180 coming back, and at that time he would come into my view to my right-hand side, and that I would open up with the machine gun then.
Were you told anything that he was going to be making this cross while carrying two children, one under each arm?
No, no.
During cross-examination, McClarty said he would not have hesitated to tell director John Landis if he had thought the scene was dangerous. Landis and 4 others are charged with manslaughter in this trial. Paul.
And if you have driven downtown lately, you know the traffic problem downtown.
The set of the Twilight Zone movie during the night of the fatal crash in 1982. Williams said he followed orders from the special effects coordinator, defendant Paul Stewart, orders which violated rules set by fire safety officers. They had prohibited the placement of explosives under structures on the set.
Were you told to place that mortar under that structure, sir?
Yes,
And who told you to place that mortar there?
Mr. Stewart.
How many mortars did you place or load that were under a structure?
I placed one mortar under a structure.
The prosecution contends that debris thrown up by the explosion under the HUD downed the helicopter that killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 children. But Williams said he checked the structure after the explosion.
What, if anything, was left of that structure, sir?
The structure itself and the bamboo flooring.
Their whole theory is based on the fact that the floor downed the helicopter, and Mr. Williams told them in August of '82, September of '82, in the grand jury in '83, and the preliminary hearing in 1984 that the floor was there, and they simply will not believe it because it doesn't fit with their theory, which is a phony theory.
That's absolutely a lie. There is no way that floor was intact, because when the investigators arrived at the scene, there was no floor there. We have pictures to show there was no floor.
The defense contends the accident was unforeseeable, caused by extreme heat which melted material on the helicopter, throwing it out of balance. Williams' testimony about the overzealous performance of another technician, James Chamomile, supported that theory.
I heard several explosions go off in rapid order, as though either the person on the board had slipped or he had raked the board. Raking the board means that you have started and then just come through rapidly.
He thought it was safe. He wouldn't have done it if it wasn't safe, and he testified that it was the other special effects man who raked his board that caused the accident. So that completely vindicates all 5 defendants in this case, and it's destroyed the prosecution's case.
The other special effects man who worked with Williams, James Chamomile, has yet to testify. He, like Williams and other technicians, has been granted immunity from prosecution by the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office in exchange for information concerning the accident. John?
Thank you, Scott. Terrence and Marie Duffy, the slain parents of Dallas star Patrick Duffy, will be cremated with no
manslaughter trial. Special effects technician James Chamomile took part in a show-and-tell demonstration in the courtroom as he showed jurors how he set off bombs on the night of the fatal accident using lights. The demonstration was designed to dramatize the split-second timing which was required. Chamomile also showed jurors the welder's hat he was wearing that night, testifying that he never looked up to see the helicopter once the special effects bombs started going off. Chamomile also admitted that he alone had the final say on whether it was safe to detonate the bombs. He has been granted immunity from prosecution in exchange for his testimony. Jerry.
Angela, funeral services are pending for bandleader Horace.
James Chamomile has been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. Chamomile testified that plans for the final scene, destruction of a village, seem sketchy.
To your knowledge, sir, was there ever a diagram or a schematic made of precisely where the explosions were placed for this final scene?
I don't believe so, no.
And to your knowledge, sir, was there ever a test explosion set off to determine the magnitude of the special explosions that you were present at?
No, not really.
But Chamomile overheard a discussion between two of the trial's defendants, Director John Landis and Special Effects Coordinator Paul Stewart.
What did you hear Mr. Landis say?
That he would like to see the shack go up.
Did you get instructions by anyone, sir, to place a mortar under any particular structure?
From Mr. Stewart.
The prosecution contends that a blast from explosives under a structure prohibited by fire marshals downed the helicopter, that John Landis ordered it done, and that Paul Stewart did nothing to prevent it.
Did he, while you were firing your board, attempt to stop you from firing at all?
I don't believe so, no.
Chamomile said he waited until Vic Morrow and the children were out of the line of fire before setting off the blasts. The defense contends Chamomile caused the accident by triggering the explosions too soon.
Coming up tomorrow, Susan Lucci.
Well, looky here.
Stand in the Twilight Zone trial today. Elizabeth Anderson is at the criminal courts building, and we'll go to her for a live report. Elizabeth.
John, for the third day in a row now, attorneys continue to grill a key witness, James Chamomile, a veteran special effects man who the defense attorneys still say caused the fatal Twilight Zone crash. Special effects man James Chamomile testified that he looked up only once at the helicopter to make sure the actors were safe and began firing the fatal explosions. But within seconds, debris from those explosions sent the helicopter into an uncontrollable spin, killing Vic Morrow and the two children. Chamomile has testified that he believed that scene was safe, but prosecutor Leah D'Agostino insists disastrous last-minute changes out of Chamomile's control delivered the tragic conclusion.
If you had been told, sir, that a helicopter was going to be brought into a position close to that hut at approximately 24 feet off the ground, would that affect your decision as to whether it was safe or not safe to place a bomb there?
Yes, it would.
And would you consider it safe to place a bomb there had you known those facts?
I would not.
Despite what appeared to be conflicting testimony at many times today by Chamomile, the defense believes he clears their client's names.
He should have looked, and he didn't look, and the prosecution gave him immunity. I don't think he should have been prosecuted, but he obviously is the one that caused the accident, and not any of the other defendants.
The defense has been saying that from day one. They have to put the blame on somebody, and it's always been convenient to put it on Mr. Chamomile.
Although it may seem like it at times, Mr. Chamomile is not on trial. He has been granted immunity for his testimony in this case and also for his testimony in the preliminary hearing and grand jury. The 5 defendants are Director John Landis and the 4 other people he worked with on the set. They are charged with reckless conduct or involuntary manslaughter for the deaths of Mika Lee, Renee Chen, and Vic Morrow. The trial continues tomorrow. Live from the criminal courthouse, Elizabeth Anderson, Channel 4 News.
All right, Elizabeth, thank you so much. Reports the expert told the jurors that if he had seen how close the helicopter was to the explosives, he would not have set them off.
Was there any reason you were not looking at the helicopter?
Because my attention was focused on the children and Vic.
James Kemmermile testified he did not look to see where the helicopter was after he started setting off 8 mortars. Testified he was told by one of the defendants, Special Effects Coordinator Paul Stewart, not to set off the explosives while the helicopter was directly above or near the mortars. And Kemmermile testified no matter what anyone else said, it was his responsibility to make sure it was safe to set off the explosives. The defense says now Kemmermile has exonerated all the defendants.
That proves exactly what happened. He should have looked, and he didn't look, and the prosecution gave him immunity. I don't think he should have been prosecuted, but he obviously is the one that caused the accident, and not any of the other defendants.
The prosecution still holds firm to its position that the defendants, Landis, Folsey, Allingham, Stewart, and Wingo, knew the scene was dangerous and still placed Morrow and the 2 children in the middle of it.
You just do not change things on a scene involving explosions, helicopters, and human beings. You do not change things without advising everyone.
The prosecution's case has been damaged by Kemmermile. He has never before testified that he was told not to set off explosives till the helicopter was clear. The prosecution took aim at that and other crucial elements of his testimony in a style that drew a long series of objections that were sustained overwhelmingly by the court. And further, at one point, the prosecutor was admonished by the judge. In areas where Kemmermile was expected to help the prosecution, he has changed his story. For instance, on where the helicopter was exactly in that fatal 2:20 scene. He is a key and crucial witness in this case. This is his 3rd day of testimony. He is expected back tomorrow. Reporting from downtown Los Angeles at the Twilight Zone trial, Paul Dandridge, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
For the 3rd day in a row, unusually high tides washed.
And very good at what she does. She's an assistant district attorney in Los Angeles, and her name is Leah D'Agostino. Her record of convictions has earned her a big reputation as well. Her nickname is the Dragon Lady. These days, she's taking on a battery of defense attorneys as prosecutor of the Twilight Zone movie trial. In profile tonight, Leah D'Agostino.
Were you ever on location on a motion picture and your boss told you, I understand the district attorney's office is getting a bench warrant out for you, you better call him?
Yes.
So in other words, you did know that we were trying to reach you, sir. Isn't that true?
I think she's dishonest and a sick woman, and she's totally obsessed with her own persona and turning this case into a media event for her.
She puts her whole body and soul into it, and that's my type of prosecutor.
Did you ever see a smaller version of this particular photograph?
I was shown several photographs I do not recall.
And when you were shown several photographs...
Leah D'Agostino has angered her opponents, impressed her colleagues, and delighted the media as she single-handedly presented the state's manslaughter case against the Twilight Zone filmmakers. The 91-pound assistant district attorney faces off with 6 high-paid attorneys every day, who each represent a different client. But they banded together to see she doesn't win this case.
It doesn't scare me. The only time that it bothers me, shall we say, is when, and you may have seen this in the last couple of days, when they all object at the same time and they jump up and yell objection and a reason for it. When they do that, it really ruptures my eardrums because it's so loud. That stunts.
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative. She's asked the question. She's got the answer.
Sustained.
In the 5 months since this trial has begun, D'Agostino has questioned more than 40 witnesses as she tries to prove film director John Landis and his 4 co-defendants are responsible for the deaths of actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors. The 3 were killed during the filming of a scene involving a helicopter stunt. In her 9.5 years with the district attorney's office, D'Agostino has never lost a case. She put so many rapists, murderers, and career criminals away for life that inside the jail she became known as a Dragon Lady. It's a name she's proud of.
I take no offense at it at all because it means that I'm tough and I won't give in to these criminals.
D'Agostino doesn't give in to uncooperative witnesses either.
That the machine gun fire from the helicopter was going to be the cue on the ground for the special effects people to set off the explosion.
Not from my side.
2 children have been killed. For what? For a lousy motion picture? There's no motion picture in the history of this world that's worth even 1 human life, let alone 3. I mean, we have 3 dead human beings, 2 of whom are tiny children. I mean, how could you not be committed?
Critics say she's taken that commitment too far.
I just think she wants very badly to win because it's a big case for her.
and she'll do or say anything she has to win the case.
I'll re-ask the question again.
No, I want to show the court, Your Honor. I want to get a statement about...
Inside the courtroom, the two sides argue over legal matters. But outside, the arguments become much more petty.
I don't admire Mrs. DeAgostino, and there's no way I'd ever like Mrs. DeAgostino. If I were the prosecutor, I would not have prosecuted the case this way.
It's her one big case. She loves it. She enjoys it. She dresses for the occasion.
DeAgostino doesn't mind being called a clothes horse. She even admitted to one reporter that her wardrobe is so large that she doesn't repeat an outfit in 2 months. But she resents her opponent's accusations that she's using this case for personal gain.
I don't get paid by winning or losing a case. The defense attorneys, on the other hand, do get clients and acquire reputations and get the big money through getting people acquitted.
DeAgostino says she doesn't need the money. Her husband has plenty of it, and she has no aspirations of moving into private practice. She went to law school late in life as an afterthought to 2 other brief careers, one as a nightclub manager and one as a theater agent. It was an ad in the TV Guide that convinced her to be a lawyer, and now she's convinced that she can beat these other more experienced lawyers in this case. She says she's not superstitious, but every time she wears this lucky bee and carries her 6 lucky blue pens, things seem to go her way. And when they don't go her way, she takes cover in her office, prepares for her next battle, and takes her aggressions out on her voodoo doll.
Take that and that and that.
For the Independent News, I'm Andrea Kaiser in Los Angeles.
Coming up, the quest to do what no one has done before, around the world in a balloon, nonstop.
In the Twilight Zone murder trial on this Monday, February 9th.
On 7.
Day that actors were exposed to unnecessary danger on the set of Twilight Zone, the movie. Cooper said stunt doubles and dummies could have been used in many of those shots instead of actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors. All 3 died on the set. Cooper also said some of the film's special effects people were of dubious quality.
I can't say the qualifications of the director, but I can say the choices of the director, I think, were unfortunate.
They were just not capable of doing the scene properly?
It isn't doing it properly. Many of us would never have done the scene that way at all, period.
Cooper's main point was that the actors were placed too close to live explosives and a helicopter. Paul.
Tony, at this hour, Muslim militants say that the children and Mr. Morrow should not have been in that position, in my opinion.
Under cross-examination by the defense, Cooper went even further, saying the production should have been shut down because of problems during rehearsals. That, he said, is the director's responsibility.
I'm responsible at that point. I'm the director. I'm the captain of this ship. I have hired the wrong people or one wrong person, or until I could collect my thoughts, I would have shut us down. I know it would have cost a lot of money.
He's sort of a crusader, and he wants to come in and testify for the prosecution, and it seems to me that that's what he's doing. But I don't think he has any expertise in helicopters or special effects.
Cornell Chapman in Los Angeles for NBC News.
Change of pace coming up. And being a veteran actor and director, Cooper is the chairman of the Directors Guild Safety Committee. And today, Cooper reviewed the scene in which actor Vic Morrow and 2 children were killed when a helicopter crashed down on them.
I'm qualified to say that the children and Mr. Morrow should not have been in that position, in my opinion.
Cooper saying safety precautions were violated, and if he'd been the director, he would have shut down production rather than risk an accident. Want some political gossip? Insider.
Prosecutors presented evidence of the actual scene of the fatal helicopter crash in the Twilight Zone movie trial. Elizabeth Anderson reports from the location near Castaic.
This was the most dramatic moment today when a helicopter flew at 24 feet above the river at Indian Dunes. That's exactly how low a chopper was the night of the fatal crash 5 years ago. Witnesses have testified they heard the director John Landis order the chopper to fly even lower. Suddenly, debris from special effects explosions that soared far above the 90-foot bluff knocked the helicopter out of the sky onto the 3 actors in the river below, killing Mika Lee, Renee Chen, and Vic Morrow. The director, John Landis, and the 4 other defendants and their attorneys were all here today, surveying the scene, watching the demonstration, but saying very little. It was officially another day in court. As usual, the day's events were intended for the jury. At the last minute, defense attorneys successfully argued that the chopper should not fly before the jurors.
We objected to just a test explosion without showing everything. In other words, we objected to not having the huts recreated, the sampan, the pier, have someone stand where the children of Vic Morrow were and have it done as it was planned, safely. We did not object to that.
The prosecutor was clearly disappointed.
I tried to envision how I would have felt had I been Vic Morrow or one of those children directly under it, and I couldn't.
Elizabeth Anderson for NBC News.
Helicopter accident that killed 3 actors back in 1982. Before the jury arrived, Judge Roger Boren ordered a helicopter to simulate the path of the helicopter that was involved in the particular accident. Prosecutors wanted permission to reenact the exact flight for the jury, but after watching it, the judge held court on the riverbank, listened to arguments from both sides, and then decided against the reenactment. When the jurors arrived, they were shown pictures and diagrams to acquaint them further with what actually happened that night. The prosecution has just wound up its presentation today against the 5 defendants. Tomorrow, the defense will begin its case. Paul.
Tony, other news tonight.
Can Valerie Bertinelli grab all of life's gusto?
Will the Wizard need more than magic to catch Cosby?
How far is Russia behind in the music video race?
And if Mary's with me in its case against director John Landis and 4 others at the Twilight Zone manslaughter trial. Actor Vic Morrow and 2 children were killed on the movie set in July of 1982. Today, the defense began to present its side, and Scott Osborne has more.
In a surprise development, the first witness called to the stand for the defense was the film's director, John Landis. Since the trial began, Landis has come to court to hear the prosecution's case against him and 4 other defendants. Today, it was his turn to recount the events surrounding the movie set deaths. But director Landis said no one in the film production crew warned him of the danger in the scene that took the lives of Vic Morrow and the 2 children. The Landis appearance followed Judge Roger Boren's denial of a defense motion to dismiss charges against all 5 Twilight Zone defendants. The prosecution concluded its case after calling 71 witnesses in 71 days of testimony. Mary?
Thank you, Scott. ABC's miniseries America slipped again in last night's ratings and
etc., etc. I mean, he knows what he can get out of an actor, and he knows what performance he wants to get out of himself.
Oh, well, how can Mrs. D'Agostino complain about theatrics? That's the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard in my life. Maybe she's not liking it. Is that possible?
How do you think you did this morning?
I think he's doing very well.
John Landis will take the stand and give his version of what led up to that fatal war scene. Then the prosecution will have its chance to cross-examine him and challenge his testimony that conflicts with earlier witnesses. From the county courthouse, Gina Liu, Channel 11 News.
In Colorado, darkness has forced rescue.
Tom Lawrence, Wendy Gordon, Scott St. James Sports, Andrew Amador Weather, Sandy Newton Entertainment, Russ Nichols Consumer Wise, LA's Primetime News, Channel 9's 9 o'clock news.
For the first time, Twilight Zone director John Landis is telling his story, his version of events that led to the deaths of actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors on his movie set. Landis admitted wrongdoing in hiring the children, but Channel 9's Mark Trank reports Landis denied putting them in deadly danger.
Director John Landis is the first witness to testify for the defense in the Twilight Zone trial. Under questioning by attorney James Neal, the 36-year-old Landis admitted that he and several of his co-defendants deliberately broke the law by knowingly hiring 2 children without a permit, the same 2 children who were killed when a helicopter crashed during filming of the final scene.
We decided to break the law. We decided wrongly to violate the labor code.
Landis testified he rejected using midget actors or dummies instead, and he contradicted key prosecution witnesses when he denied that anyone ever warned him the filming of the scene with helicopter and explosives would indeed be dangerous.
Was there any suggestion of danger in this conversation?
No.
Matter of fact, John, did anybody ever suggest to you using midgets or dummies in the 220 scene because of danger to children?
No.
Afterwards, neither Landis nor his wife had any comment for reporters. His attorney had nothing but praise for his star witness.
I just think he's doing a first-rate job of that. I don't know what the jury, of course, we don't know what the jury senses, but from what I see, he's done a wonderful job.
But prosecutor Lea D'Agostino, who is yet to question Landis, dismissed his testimony as unconvincing and simply untrue.
But right now, just in his testimony today, I started counting how many people, if he's telling the truth so far, at least 19 other people are lying, and for what reason? What motive do all these other people have to come into a court of law and under oath fabricate a story? They have no vested stake in this case. Mr. Landis certainly does.
Many believe that the testimony of John Landis will either make or break this case. Tomorrow, the Twilight Zone director will be back on the witness stand, and when prosecutor Lea D'Agostino begins her cross-examination, it is expected she will question Landis about potentially damaging statements he made to investigators immediately following the accident 4.5 years ago. In downtown Los Angeles, I'm Mark Trank, Channel 9 News.
Los Angeles.
We decided to break the law. We decided wrongly to violate the labor code.
Channel 5 News at 10, the #1 primetime news hour in Los Angeles. Now, award-winning Hal Fishman, T.U. Lake, Larry McCormick, Keith Olbermann with sports, and the entire Channel 5 news team.
Good evening. The film director John Landis, the key figure in the Twilight Zone manslaughter trial, took the stand for the first time today in his own defense. And Landis admitted that he broke a law. Warren Wilson reports.
Landis was introduced to the court as a high school dropout who worked at menial jobs before becoming a major motion picture director who made social statements about racism through his art. Minorities make up a significant percentage of the jury. Under questioning by former Watergate attorney James Neal, Landis was candid about breaking state labor laws by hiring 2 children and working them at night without a permit.
We decided to break the law. We decided wrongly to violate the labor code.
He told the packed courtroom, including his parents, that no one had ever discussed dangers before or during the filming of The Twilight Zone.
Did there come a time, Mr. Landis, when you met certain parents and their children?
Yes.
You told these parents about the helicopter in the scene?
Yes.
Did you tell them about the explosions in the same scene?
Yes.
Did anybody ever suggest to you that those scenes, as planned, were dangerous?
Never.
Landis's testimony contradicted that of several other witnesses, including the parents of the deceased children.
At least some of the parents said they weren't told about the helicopter and the special effects. We have to respond to that. It'll be up to the jury to decide whether that's important. If so, how important. We simply have to tell you, and John simply has to tell you what he recollects and let the chips fall where they may.
The whole world is lying, according to John Landis, except John Landis. I find that somewhat incredible. And I'm assuming that the jurors will, too.
Today's testimony led up to and set the stage for further accounting by Landis of his state of mind just before shooting the fatal scene in the Twilight Zone. Testimony of pre-production, planning, meetings, and rehearsals, all expected throughout his story to show he did nothing gross or reckless to cause the accident. All that and more when he resumes the stand tomorrow morning. From the criminal courts building in downtown Los Angeles, Warren Wilson, Channel 5 News at 10.
There are reports tonight that the First Lady, Nancy Reagan...
ABC TV, Los Angeles. Now, the Southland's leading news, Eyewitness News, at 11.
Well, and he admitted he knowingly broke the law when he used 2 child actors after hours, but he insisted that he did tell their parents that there was possible danger in the scene.
You told these parents about the helicopter in the scene?
Yes.
Did you tell them about the explosions in the same scene?
Yes.
Did you tell them that you were not going to have a permit?
No, I did not.
Later, the prosecutor said she counted 19 instances in which Landis's testimony had contradicted other witnesses.
By a movie director on trial for manslaughter. John Landis admitted that he and other defendants decided to break the law by hiring 2 small children to work without permits on the Twilight Zone movie. Landis told the jury how he decided to soften an otherwise harsh script by having actor Vic Morrow rescue 2 Vietnamese youngsters in a story he said was designed as a social commentary. Landis also told the court he wanted to tell a story dealing with social issues, specifically racism.
The Twilight Zone manslaughter trial is now telling his side of the story in Los Angeles Superior Court. He, of course, is John Landis, who directed the 1982 movie Scene, which killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors. Today, Landis admitted he broke the law by hiring the children without work permits, but he denied ever being told the scene involving a helicopter and explosives was dangerous.
Did anybody ever suggest to you that those scenes, as planned, were dangerous?
No. Landis will continue his testimony in the trial tomorrow. There was a special...
This is the Midnight News for Thursday, February 19th, 1987.
Hello, I'm Tony Cox. This morning, a manslaughter trial takes center stage in downtown Los Angeles. Director John Landis with some startling testimony as the defense opened its case in the Twilight Zone trial. Landis admitted under oath that he knowingly hired 2 child actors without the proper permits to work them at night.
We decided to break the law. We decided wrongly to violate the labor code. We would find children and whose parents we would explain to them that we were doing a technical violation.
Landis disputed earlier testimony in which the parents of the children denied they were warned there was any danger. Actor Vic Morrow and the 2 children died when a helicopter crashed on them during filming of Twilight Zone, the movie. That was in July 1982. The director, charged with involuntary manslaughter, is expected to take the stand again later this morning. In Encino, an explosion
is charged with embezzling millions of dollars. Authorities are worried that Compton gangs are arming themselves with automatic weapons, and emotion chokes director John Landis in his second day on the stand in the Twilight Zone trial.
A famous $1 million.
New clue. In Southern California, Channel 7, KABC TV, Los Angeles. Now, the Southland's leading news, Eyewitness News, at 4.
Good afternoon.
More news at 4.
Story.
Thank you very much, Tony. The key figure in the Twilight Zone manslaughter trial is back on the witness stand for a second day today. Paul Dandridge is standing by at the downtown courthouse with a live report on the testimony of John Landis. Paul.
Larry, an emotionally charged morning and afternoon here at the Twilight Zone trial. Landis continues, as you said, on the second day of the stand, testifying. At one point this morning, he broke down on the stand, cried, as his attorney, Jim Neal, took him to that moment that he has not talked about publicly in 4.5 years, when Vic Morrow, Mika Lee, and Renee Chen were killed in the tragic accident at Indian Dunes, Twilight Zone, the movie. The prosecutor, when it was her turn to ask Landis a question, mockingly asked him, "Do you want a Kleenex?" an apparent attempt to tell the jury that this man was not being sincere. She also asked him if he was a good storyteller, knew how to make himself and other people cry on the stand. Landis, however, stayed with his position that he planned everything well. No one told him anything was dangerous. Here's how he's led up to that moment.
The record will reflect in Twilight Zone case that we have all counsel.
The helicopter really just startled me. I was like, what? And then, yes, I became aware. I was, oh my God, where's Vic and Mika and Renee? And I ran to them, yes.
John, before the 220 shot and the accident, did any fire safety officer ever tell you that they thought the scene was unsafe?
No.
Did any special effects person ever say they thought the scene was unsafe?
No.
Did the helicopter pilot, after the change had been made from the 11:30 shot, say he thought the scene was unsafe?
No.
As I mentioned, the prosecutor went after Mr. Landis, trying to find misstatements, inaccuracies, lies, the word certainly that she would use. She has some very strong feelings about Landis.
I think you'll have some.
Does it come easily to you, Mr. Landis?
Crime?
Yes.
No.
Doesn't come easily to you?
No.
It's a perfectly orchestrated, choreographed script. Just the right amount of hesitancy, just the right amount of looking down, the right amount of looking at the jury, the right amount of smiling when a smile was necessary. It's extremely well done.
I think he told the truth as he saw it, which is what he said.
The prosecutor several times tried to have Mr. Landis say, in effect, that other witnesses who disagreed with him were lying, were inaccurate. And the judge admonished her at one point and then admonished her again, an unusual position for a judge to do, and then threatened to sanction her in front of the jury. On some of the facts that were made today, Landis could not remember whether or not he told the helicopter pilot to come lower, lower. A key point on the part of the prosecution that he was reckless on the set. He could not remember, as I said. He said on several occasions that he had meetings. At one point he wanted to blow up certain huts in the village. Paul Stewart said that would not be safe, it would be dangerous, and so he did not do it. Generally, he is saying, of course, that he did not know also about a mortar under hut number 4, another key part of the prosecution's case. Whether the jury or not believes it, involuntary manslaughter, as I have mentioned, depends on what was going on in somebody's mind. And they're just about coming out here, and we're going to hear from both sides, and we'll get back to you. Reporting live from downtown Los Angeles at the Twilight Zone trial, Paul Dandridge, back to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. We'll get back to you a little bit later in these broadcasts, Jerry.
High on Wednesday. Courthouse now, where that manslaughter trial is continuing, as she has a live update. Elizabeth.
John and Kirsty, as you mentioned, for the first time, John Landis talked about the helicopter crash that occurred 4 years ago in July, no, almost 5 years ago now, on the set of the Twilight Zone movie, a helicopter crash that claimed the lives of veteran actor Vic Morrow and 2 children. Yesterday, Landis admitted that he illegally hired the 2 children, but today on the witness stand, he said the tragic events that followed were not foreseeable. Director John Landis described virtually every move he made the night of the fatal accident on the Twilight Zone movie set. He calmly testified that everything was well planned, but at the last minute, special effects downed a chopper, killing 3 actors.
The helicopter really just startled me. I was like, what? And then, yes, I became aware. I was, oh my God, where's Vic and Mika and Renee? And I ran to them, yes.
John, before the 220 shot and the accident, did any fire safety officer ever tell you that they thought the scene was unsafe?
No.
But past witnesses have testified that Landis not only ignored warnings of danger, but continued to order the helicopter to fly even lower than 24 feet, the height at which it began to plunge to earth.
Did you say to the helicopter, lower, lower?
I don't recall saying that. I don't know if I said it or not, but I have no recollection of saying it.
At one point, Landis appeared to be close to tears, but the prosecutor insisted he not only faked that scene, but most of his testimony as well.
It's extremely well done. I frankly wish I had an Oscar that I could give him for his performance.
I thought he did everything in the world not to show emotion.
The day was not without a visit from celebrities. Dan Aykroyd was here today. He said it was his second appearance here during the 6-month trial and said he was here to support Landis. Aykroyd joined dozens of Landis's friends and family members who packed the courtroom today on this, the first day of the prosecution's cross-examination, a process that could take many more days to complete. And as usual, Landis, who was accused of involuntary manslaughter, refused to answer any questions from the reporters today. Live from the criminal courthouse, Elizabeth Anderson, Channel 4 News.
Okay,
witness stand in the Twilight Zone trial.
Zone case, and we'll have a live report today.
Landis, an emotional day on the witness stand for the Twilight Zone director. Good evening, everybody. It is now the 5 o'clock hour. The key figure in the Twilight Zone manslaughter trial testified for a second day today. For the first time, movie director John Landis is talking publicly about the 1982 on-set accident that killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 children. Channel 7's Paul Dandridge, who has been covering this story for us all along, is standing by at the downtown courthouse tonight with a live report on today's proceedings. Paul?
Paul, as you said, an emotionally charged day. Landis off the stand now. Will be back on Monday. There's a break on Friday, as there usually is. Landis started crying as his attorney, Jim Neal, took him to that moment at 2:20 a.m. on July 23rd, 1982, when Mika Lee, Renee Chen, and Vic Morrow Morrow were killed. He was telling me that he was trying to hold back the tears, but finally they came out. The first time, as you said, that he has talked about this publicly, on the stand yesterday, back again today. The prosecutor started her cross-examination today, and she tried to shake any credibility on the part of Landis, and at first asked him a question that tried to indicate that he was not being sincere.
Mr. Landis, would you like some Kleenex, sir?
I think you'll have some.
Does it come easily to you, Mr. Landis?
Crime?
Yes.
No.
Doesn't come easily to you?
No.
The prosecutor also asked Landis if he was a good storyteller, if he was an actor. There were other questions that came up. Landis talking about a group of people who said that they were experts as helicopter pilots.
I think it's very easy after an accident to make pronouncements about how things should or should not be done. I think it's simple in hindsight to make vast and broad statements that ultimately are self-serving and put yourself in a good light.
It's a perfectly orchestrated, choreographed script. Just the right amount of hesitancy, just the right amount of looking down, the right amount of looking at the jury, the right amount of smiling when a smile was necessary. It's extremely well done. I frankly wish I had an Oscar that I could give him for his performance.
I think he told the truth as he saw it, which is what he said.
If there was ever a time when you could say you could cut the tension in the courtroom with a knife, this was it. There is no law of laws between Lea D'Agostino and John Landis, and you could feel that in the courtroom. The prosecutor trying to go after Mr. Landis, trying to show some misstatements, some misfacts, trying to show, I think, a word that she would use, lies on his part. He would say, in many cases, that people who have testified before did not say that, or that he was never told that the scene upcoming was dangerous. And, of course, the prosecutor is trying to make that point, has made that point with her different witnesses. He is back on the stand, as I said on Monday. One other point, of course, that came up, he did not remember saying lower, lower, an important part of the case for the prosecutor, had no recollection of that. There was a casting sheet that came in. It said that we were going to hire 2 children on a certain night, and he did not remember talking to the casting director, who said at one point in her testimony, I think this sounds kind of dangerous. Landis said she never said that. It continues on Monday. Reporting live from downtown Los Angeles, Paul Dandridge, back to you.
Thank you, Paul, very much. There are more.
Witness News at 6.
He watched a damaged helicopter fall and kill 3 people while he was directing a scene in the movie Twilight Zone. But in his second day of testimony, Landis insisted that nobody warned him the scene might be dangerous. Elizabeth Anderson has more.
Director John Landis described virtually every move he made the night of the fatal accident on the Twilight Zone movie set. He calmly testified that everything was well planned, but at the last minute, special effects downed a chopper, killing 3 actors.
I watched Vic carrying Mika and Renee, and I watched them struggling across the river, and I saw Vic fall where we discussed he would fall, and then the helicopter crashed in front of me. The helicopter really just startled me. I was like, what? And then, yes, I became aware. I was, oh my God, where's Vic and Mika and Renee? And I ran to them, yes.
Did any fire safety officer ever tell you that they thought the scene was unsafe?
No.
But past witnesses have testified that Landis not only ignored warnings of danger, but continued to order the helicopter to fly even lower than 24 feet, the height at which it began to plunge to earth.
Did you say to the helicopter, lower, lower?
I don't recall saying that.
But several witnesses for the prosecution have already testified that they distinctly remember Landis saying that. At one point, Landis appeared to be on the verge of tears, but the prosecutor said it was only a carefully staged performance, one deserving of an Oscar. This is only the first day of Patty Ecker, Channel 2.
The most outrageous.
How deep is the love between Liz Taylor and George Hamilton?
Who do you think is Hollywood's sexiest man?
Is Geraldo Rivera's best salesman?
Will Mel Brooks' new movie be a smash?
Entertainment Tonight tees off for Thursday, February 19th, 1987.
That's interesting. No, it's not.
Cut!
Hi, everybody. I'm John Tesh.
And I'm Mary Hart. Hollywood
Trial director John Landis took the stand for the second day. On questioning by his attorney, Landis said he was attentive to safety and had taken proper precautions before the helicopter accident, which killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 children. Landis described watching the final moments before the crash.
I watched Vic carrying Mika and Renee, and I watched them struggling across the river. And I saw Vic fall where we discussed he would fall. And then the helicopter crashed in front of me.
I believe you ran out to the helicopter, is that correct?
Yes, the helicopter really just startled me. I was like, what? And then, yes, I became aware. I was, oh my God, where's Vic and Mika and Renee? And I ran to them, yes.
The defense contends that the crash was caused by special effects explosions, which were set off prematurely, a circumstance out of Landis' control. The prosecution claims Landis recklessly combined the dangerous elements which led to the tragedy.
Struggling across the river, and I saw Vic fall where we discussed he would fall. And then the helicopter crashed in front of me.
After that, Landis seemed to sniffle and dabbed at his eyes. When it was the prosecuting attorney's turn, she sarcastically offered him some tissue.
Landis, would you like some Kleenex, sir?
She then asked if Landis was a good storyteller and actor, and could he cry on cue.
Does it come easily to you, Mr. Landis?
Crying?
Yes.
No.
Later in the day, actor Dan Aykroyd showed up.
John's a dear friend, and just here to support him in any way I can.
For hours, the prosecuting attorney challenged Landis' testimony that conflicted with earlier witnesses. Under cross-examination, Landis remained composed.
You wanted to wipe this village off the face of the earth, right?
No.
You never made that comment in the office?
I don't recall that.
After day 2 on the witness stand, both sides felt they had gained ground.
It's a perfectly orchestrated, choreographed script. Just the right amount of hesitancy, just the right amount of looking down, the right amount of looking at the jury, the right amount of smiling when a smile was necessary. It's extremely well done. I frankly wish I had an Oscar that I could give him for his performance.
Faking his emotion? I thought on the contrary. I think he tried not to show any emotion.
The prosecuting attorney says she plans to cross-examine Landis for about another hour, and she intends to punch holes through what she describes as a very well-rehearsed, well-coached piece of storytelling. From the criminal courts building, Gina Liu, Channel 11 News.
A big bank scandal is unfolding.
Moments today as director John Landis underwent more intense cross-examination at the Twilight Zone trial. In his 3rd day on the stand, Landis broke down and wept when the prosecutor asked him how many times he'd seen film of that accident.
It's very hard for me to watch. I'm sorry.
Your Honor, would you like some Kleenex, sir?
No, thank you.
Landis, charged with manslaughter in the deaths of actor Vic Morrow and 2 children, is expected to finish his testimony tomorrow.
Now let's go to Larry Carroll at the live action camera.
Thank you very much, Tony. An emotional day in the courtroom today where film director John Landis is standing trial for manslaughter in connection with the deaths of Vic Morrow and 2 children in connection with the filming of The Twilight Zone. He was under cross-examination today, and Paul Dandridge was there. He's with us now. Paul?
As you said, a very emotional day in the courtroom. Landis breaking down again when the prosecutor relentlessly went after him, trying to break his story to a certain extent, comparing it to his testimony over the last 3 days of today and the last couple of weeks. They broke just a short time ago. You can see people coming out of the courtroom and trying to compare what he has testified to most recently to his grand jury testimony, to his comments before the National Transportation Safety Board. Landis becoming emotional when the prosecutor kept talking to him about those moments just before and just after the tragic accident. She was trying to get him to say that he was not telling the truth, perhaps not as accurate as he could be, trying to shake his story in front of the jury. The witness said that he did not remember saying lower, 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 and stayed with his story. In fact, fought back.
When you told Vic Morrow to trip, when you had this plan that he would trip, was it also planned that he would drop Renee, or almost drop Renee, or lose his hold on, his grip on Renee? Was that also planned?
We did not discuss dropping Renee, and I don't believe he did.
Well, you have seen the footage on how many occasions, sir?
As often as this jury and twice before that.
You only saw it twice before this jury saw it?
It's very hard for me to watch. I'm sorry.
Your Honor, would you like some Kleenex, sir?
No, thank you.
The prosecutor asked if Landis was making up the story about Vic Morrow falling and tripping. He said no, and he came close to crying when he talked about the children.
What did you tell them that was going to happen? You said you were very specific now, and I'd like to know, what did you tell them at this point?
I was standing with Dr. Lee and Mrs. Chen and Mika and Renee there. Excuse me 1 minute. 3 large explosions would go off against the cliff.
Strange and
Involuntary manslaughter.
15 times the court clerk read the words "not guilty." The 5 Twilight Zone movie makers were cleared today of all charges in the deaths of actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors. The accident took place 5 years ago. The jury deliberated 9 days after sitting through 10 months of testimony in one of Hollywood's most bitter and highly publicized cases.
In our current state of mind, stating that we believe this was all an unforeseeable accident. You don't prosecute people for unforeseeable accidents.
For movie director John Landis, it was the end of at least part of his personal ordeal.
Almost 5 years ago, an accident happened on the set of one of my films that killed 3 people, and that none of this changes that. It's a terrible moment in my life, in our lives, in many people's lives.
For Twilight Zone prosecutor Leah DeAgostino, it was a stunning defeat.
I'm very unhappy with the result, but there's no question in my mind and in the mind of just about everyone I've spoken with in Hollywood believes that these defendants acted recklessly.
DeAgostino, who lived up to her reputation as a dragon lady, presented more than 70 witnesses in her effort to prove the movie makers blatantly disregarded safety on the set to make a more exciting film.
I can conceive of no case which would show even more aggravated acts of recklessness than this case.
53-year-old actor Vic Morrow and the 2 children were decapitated by a helicopter during the filming of a Vietnam War scene. The chopper had crashed after a special effects explosion went awry. Since the accident, most of the attention has been on director Landis, but there were 4 other men on trial. Unit production manager Dan Allingham, helicopter pilot Dorsey Wingo, special effects coordinator Paul Stewart, and associate producer George Folsey Jr.
We know we didn't do anything wrong. We'll never recover from the fact that we were making a movie and 3 people got killed.
Landis walks away a free man, but he still faces a civil suit filed by the parents of the child actors, and he must go before the Directors Guild to defend his actions. John Landis was the first movie director to stand trial for a death on his set, and his acquittal has undoubtedly sent a collective sigh of relief within Hollywood. Nevertheless, in the 5 years since this tragic accident occurred, steps have been taken throughout the industry to make sure something like this never happens again. In Los Angeles, this is Andrea Kaiser reporting.
Los Angeles. Now, the Southland's leading news, Eyewitness News at 11.
The Twilight Zone verdicts. John Landis and 4 other movie makers are found not guilty of manslaughter. Good evening, everyone. It's now the 11 o'clock hour. It's been nearly 5 years since actor Vic Morrow and 2 children died in one of the worst on-set accidents in movie history. Today, 5 defendants charged with involuntary manslaughter faced their verdicts after a 10-month trial, and our reporter Paul Dandridge was there. Paul.
Gene, the verdict was swift. The jury voting just once found all 5 defendants not guilty. Jurors and defendants hugging each other after the verdict. The long ordeal for 5 men, what some had wrongly called Hollywood on trial, over. A prosecutor certainly devastated. Opening statements were September 3rd last year. It ended this way.
Title of court and cause. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, John Landis, not guilty of involuntary manslaughter, as charged in count 1 of the amended information.
I'm shocked. I'm appalled. I'm disappointed because I believe that the conduct clearly was, as I said before, I don't want to sound repetitious, was about as reckless as it can get.
Well, it was just a wonderful time, and I wish we could get the jurors close for a minute. I want to kiss at least half of them and hug the rest. We're just astounded, and we're very grateful.
I'm very happy for all of the defendants, and I want to thank my wife for all her wonderful support, and all my friends, and especially the attorneys who spend so much time staying with us and helping us.
In an exclusive interview with director John Landis, he told me his thoughts today about the accident and the jury's verdict.
You said before that the deaths of Vic Morrow, Mika Lee, and Renee Chen were really not
connected to the trial.
Well, by not connected, I mean that the trial and our being found not guilty doesn't change the tragedy. It doesn't change the accident. I've learned that the concept of an accident is terrifying to people, and there must be somebody's fault, and as a participant in an accident, being there, I don't see the trial and their deaths the same. And I mean, regardless of the trial, there's still the terrible tragedy there.
It has changed our lives. We are different. I'm very grateful to the jury that they could see that it was an unforeseeable accident, and I'm happy that it's over for us.
Landis, the other 4 men, their lives will never be the same. Neither will the families of Vic Morrow, 7-year-old Mika Lee, 6-year-old Renee Chen. But the jury said this was an accident that no one could have foreseen or have prevented. Gene, Angela.
Not guilty all around, right. But this will have an effect, already has had an effect in Hollywood.
To the point where directors now are concerned about what they may say in a laughing or kidding manner, that something could happen.
Associates can rest easy tonight. After nearly 5 years and an 11-month trial, a jury has found them innocent. Okay, thanks, Paul. In other news, stem from the deaths of actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors during the film.
Let's go one liquor. And for today's verdict, and Phil Schuman is live in West Hollywood now with reaction to today's verdict. Phil?
Well, Keith, Hollywood, in effect, was on trial here, so naturally there was relief that Landis and his 4 colleagues were acquitted. But there have been improvements in safety because of the Twilight Zone accident. Earlier tonight, I talked with one of Hollywood's biggest action stars who had this to say about the Twilight Zone verdict.
I'd say the case is very complicated, and I guess justice prevails. So
Sly Stallone, as an actor, stuntman, and director, believes the Twilight Zone case has made filmmakers more safety conscious. That was echoed tonight by other industry insiders at places like Spago and Nikki Blair's, though they wouldn't speak on camera. They say they're proud of the 18 safety bulletins issued in the wake of the Twilight Zone accident, bulletins that spell out specific guidelines for shooting potentially dangerous scenes. Mark Locker is a spokesman for the Screen Actors Guild.
In 5 years, we've seen the injuries go down from 214 in 1982 to 65 in 1986.
One director who knows what John Landis and his colleagues have been going through is Hal Needham. He directed Cannonball Run. In that film, a stunt woman was hurt. She sued Needham and won. He says the Twilight Zone case has had an effect on him.
I think it'll make them a little more aware of safety, and I don't think that hurts anything. Although I've always contended that we in the picture business put more action on the screen and hurt fewer people than any. We're the best. According to OSHA's statistics, we're the safest business there is in the United States.
And the belief is now that it is even safer than before. Now, the prosecutor, Leah D'Agostino, said today that she believes that the trial may stop directors in the future from undertaking dangerous scenes. Nobody I spoke with will go that far tonight. But again, they do believe that this has all made them a lot more cautious. Reporting live, Phil Schuman, Channel 4 News in West Hollywood. Keith and Kelly?
All right, thanks very much for that report, Phil. Other news tonight, the sailor...
At age 70.
I think he would be a handsome 70.
Community. It involved the first director in Hollywood history to face criminal prosecution. Director John Landis and his associates were charged in the deaths of 3 people during the filming of Twilight Zone, the movie. In court on Friday, they were found not guilty on all counts. We have 2 reports this morning, starting with Channel 11's Tony Valdez.
It took 10 months of testimony and 9 days of deliberation, but just 1 vote for the jury to agree on a verdict.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, John Landis, not guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
And obviously I'm relieved, but it's been 5 years. It's very difficult right now to sort of have an instantaneous response.
Landis and his 4 co-defendants were accused of criminal neglect arising from a battle scene shot for the movie Twilight Zone.
Even though we've won the case, we'll never be the same after what happened that night on July 23rd, 1982. We'll never be the same thinking of what happened to Vic and the children.
The case hinged on whether or not Folsey, Landis, and the others knew how dangerous special effects explosions would be. As each not guilty verdict was read, there were sighs of relief as well as tears from the defendants' families and friends, while prosecutor Leah D'Agostino sat silently shaking her head. She had attributed the deaths to recklessness. The jury didn't agree.
You don't prosecute people for unforeseeable accidents.
As for the impact that Hollywood's aura of glamour and power may have had on the acquittals,
I think we all stuck to the facts, and no personalities involved, nothing. Just what we have as evidence, and we decided on it.
despite their verdict, jurors spoke highly of the deputy DA's efforts. She, in turn, spoke philosophically about the outcome.
And if we've succeeded in saving even one life and deterring even one director from doing this in the future, then I think the prosecution has been very well founded.
While John Landis' wife, Deborah, reacted to the verdict by climbing across the jury box to hug a juror, the movie industry's reaction is more restrained. Pat Riddle continues with that part of our report.
In an industry in love with stunts and special effects, the real-life Twilight Zone movie disaster was a jolt. From directors to extras.
Headline News, I'm Cindy Close. Weather experts say Texas is getting a Texas-sized share of storms, and John Landis is walking away free. He and 4 associates were acquitted of involuntary manslaughter in connection with the deaths of actor Vic Morrow and 2 children on his movie set. Sandy Kenyon reports.
The trial was as long as it was nasty, but John Landis and 4 associates were cleared of criminal wrongdoing in the deaths of actor Vic Morrow and 2 child performers.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, John Landis, not guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Outside the courtroom, the director's victory statement was tempered with remorse.
Almost 5 years ago, an accident happened on the set of one of my films that killed 3 people, and that none of this changes that.
The loser was prosecutor Leah D'Agostino, dubbed the Dragon Lady for her frequent verbal battles outside of court. But here she was philosophical.
I don't care to conjecture how the jury or why the jury arrived at the decision they did. I disagree with it, but I respect their right to do so.
John Landis will be remembered as the first Hollywood director charged with criminal conduct for his action on the set. If convicted, he could have been sentenced for up to 6 years in prison. But the defense all along maintained the tragedy was an accident that could not have been avoided. And the jurors believed that.
You don't prosecute people for unforeseeable accidents.
This case was closely watched in Hollywood, with the stars of Landis movies showing up to lend support. One who did was Ralph Bellamy.
Even though everyone was cleared on all points, there'll be more careful consideration of production, I think.
Director Hal Needham once witnessed an accident on his own set, but he defended the industry safety record.
Our safety record in the picture business is the best in the country, considering what we do.
The verdict of not guilty isn't expected to have much effect on the way movies are made in Hollywood, but the Twilight Zone accident itself has already served to make people more safety conscious, because no filmmaker wants the tragedy to be repeated. Sandy Kenyon, CNN, Los Angeles.
July 23rd, 1982, about 2:30 a.m., on location north of Los Angeles, at the filming of a spectacular war scene for Twilight Zone, the movie. As bombs explode overhead, actor Vic Morrow crosses a river carrying 2 Vietnamese children. The scene calls for Morrow to hoist the children into a helicopter. Instead, tragedy strikes. Amid the explosions, the chopper crashes. Its main rotor blade decapitates 53-year-old Morrow and 7-year-old Vietnamese actor Micah Din Lee. 6-year-old Renee Chin is crushed to death by the aircraft. A shocked Hollywood community, accustomed to shining spotlights on others, now found itself in the national spotlight, forced to answer charges of recklessness, arrogance, and abuse of power. American justice would determine whether the famous director John Landis was responsible for the deaths of Morrow and the 2 child actors. As in all celebrity trials, the case gave prosecutors and public officials a chance to make an example of the accused. Among other things, the Twilight Zone filmmakers took heat for their abuse of child labor laws.
How 2 children could be working at 2:30 in the morning just blows my mind.
Landis, who had forged his reputation with films like The Blues Brothers, Animal House, and Trading Places, became the first Hollywood director to be tried for death on a movie set. He and 4 crew members, associate producer George Folsey, unit production manager Dan Allingham, special effects coordinator Paul Stewart, and helicopter pilot Dorsey Wingo, all faced charges of involuntary manslaughter. They expressed disbelief at being charged.
I can think of nothing worse than losing your child. And our hearts go out to the families of Renee Chen and Mika Lee and Vic Morrow. The idea that this could have been anything but an unforeseeable accident is not only wrong, it's bewildering.
I was looped into this, and how I feel the district attorneys decided that this is a guy we're going to get in there. I mean, we just want to whittle on him some.
He certainly did want to crash his own helicopter, and with the people on board. And also, he could have endangered, that crash could have endangered the entire crew as well.
Each of the defendants faced up to 6 years in prison. Their attorneys waged a long campaign to have the charges dropped. At a preliminary hearing in January 1984, Landis and the others entered their pleas.
Not guilty.
More than 2 years after that, in September 1986, the Twilight Zone case finally went to trial. A trial which, according to prosecutor Leah Perwin D'Agostino, pitted the people of California in an uphill battle against the powerful charisma of Hollywood.
It was a very well choreographed courtroom from the standpoint of the defense, managing to have celebrities present there, your Don Amicis, your Ralph Bellamy's, and of course the jury was starstruck. Listen,